We have a great topic today. We're going to look at 5 ways that you can know and explain that reality isn't physical. Now, we talk a lot about on this channel how reality isn't physical, that it's a domain of mind, but it can be complicated sometimes, to say the least. And additionally, I have a lot of people tell me that they have a hard time explaining it to others, a hard time getting people to understand. So we're going to look at 5 ways that's a really easy way to understand that there's more to reality than the physical, and methods that you can use to explain it to others as well. So what we're looking at today is 5 ways to understand that reality is not physical, and we're going to understand this very simply. Now, the reason why is because there's a lot of videos on my channel going into this in great detail, but so for some of them, you have to have, some background in philosophy, or at least understand, certain ideas that some people may not. And if you already understand that reality is not physical, this is still a great video for you to watch, because it'll be showing simple, easy ways to be able to explain to someone, or to try and get someone thinking along the lines where they can start to understand that reality is not physical. Because if you go up to someone, if it's a friend or family member or something like that, they might not be able to, follow arguments relying on philosophical concepts in metaphysics and epistemology, like ontology and empiricism versus materialism and a monism versus a dualism and materialism and idealism and dual aspects of, an ontological substance. You get the idea. Some people will just be, what are you talking about? So this is a great way to understand it simply, if you don't, and if you do, to be able to present these as ways to explain it to people. So let's get right into it here. Just pull this up. So what we're taking a look at is, this is an article on medium.com by Bruce McGrath called What is Reality? So Bruce says, in my last 2 articles on the myth of materialism, I made the case that reality is not material, but rather non-material. In fact, the belief in materialism is a bigger leap of faith than a belief in non-materialism. If you want to know why, check out those articles. And this is exactly right. So in Hyperianism, we know that reality is not physical, but is instead a reality of mind. I've done many videos on this. If you want to know all the details on this, check out my other videos. But today, we're going to look at 5 easy ways to be able to explain that reality isn't physical. And Bruce is also right that materialism, the belief that reality is matter and only physical, that's what materialism is, the belief that reality is only physical, that takes a greater leap of faith than believing that reality is not material. And that's because if you look at the what matter is, and usually the definition of matter is something that's mind independent, a mind independent substance, which means that it can exist without mind. Now, there is no way to show that that is the case, because literally everything that we experience and everything that we think, everything goes through our mind and our sentient cognitive experiences and faculties. So everything goes through either the reducing valves of our senses or uses the thinking apparatus of our mind, but it's all part of our subjective, sentient, and conscious experience. A mind-independent substance is something that exists apart from mind, and that's a literal impossibility. But here's the thing. I'm realizing that I'm already bringing in a lot of philosophical jargon, and I want to keep this as simple as possible today, because that's what this is about. It's about how to explain it easily to people. So let's just continue. So non-materialism and reality. And of course, non-materialism, meaning that reality isn't material. Reality isn't physical. So how does that view impact our question? How does that view impact our answer to the question? What is reality? In my classes, when I taught the concept that reality is not material, most students raised in an empirically based reality had a hard time understanding and accepting it. So an empirically based reality means that most people think that knowledge comes through the senses, that what you can touch, taste, hear, and smell is real, that is what is real, and that is what actually exists. That what you experience out there is what is actually out there. This is a common sense view. This is the view that most people have, and the most view that people grow up having and become indoctrinated into. They think what is out there, and how they experience it is how it is. So when you tell people that reality isn't material, it can be very confusing. Well, like, what do you mean reality isn't physical? It seems very physical to me. So this is a difficulty that people have being able to understand. So continues, they couldn't believe that anyone could think that this world wasn't physical. As they banged their hands on their desks, how could this desk not be physical? They asked as they continued banging away. This will most likely be the questions that you get if you try to talk about this with friends or family or coworkers or whatever. What kind of drugs were they taking? They wanted to know. And that's another common thing as well, that people just think, oh, these are maybe like, you know, new age hippies getting high or something like that. But what most people don't know is that the idea that reality isn't physical is a huge part of philosophy. And with the advent of quantum mechanics, it really shows that reality can no longer be thought in materialist terms. But let's continue and stay on the course here. So Bruce continues, I had my work cut out for me. I gave them some examples to make it more intelligible. Some of the examples I used were covered in my last 2 articles. I pointed out that the atom was almost all empty space, and that banging their hands on the desks didn't prove that their hands or their desks were physical. I'm going to rehash those ideas here. So we're going to look at 5 different ways. And this first one is what nighttime dreams tell us about reality. So this is a great tool to try and be able to understand, or not understand, but explain to people that reality isn't necessarily what they experience. There were a couple of other examples I used to help them understand this position. The first one dealt with their nighttime dreams. In these dreams, we create a reality that is pretty much like our waking one. Think about that. When you go to sleep and dream, the reality that you create in your mind is very similar to a waking, to the reality that we exist in now. You don't know that you're in a dream either. When you're dreaming, unless you're lucid, you believe that that dream world is real. We walk on, so in your dream, we walk on solid ground, we touch solid objects, we can even pound on desks making noise. Then when we wake up and realize it was all a dream, we generally don't think much more about it. If we did, we might question the world we just inhabited in our dream. Reality appeared as solid as it does in our everyday waking world. And that's what I do. When I'm lucid in my dreams, I examine the dream world. I, touch things to see how similar they are to waking reality. I'll look in mirrors and examine my avatar closely. I'll do all kinds of interesting things to see what it has in common with waking reality. So reality appeared in the dream as solid as it does in our everyday waking world, but the dream world is not physical, but a mental world created by our minds. Maybe the solidity of our waking world tricks us in the same way the solidity of our dream world does. In fact, some Eastern religions believe this waking world is just another dream world that we also need to awaken from. And when we do, we attain enlightenment. So there's a lot here to say. Dreams are a great example to try and get people to understand that what they're experiencing can seem very, very physical, but is not, in fact, physical. When you go to sleep and dream, it seems physical, but it's not. It's a realm generated by your mind, and you take it to be very, very real. So what is the difference between the physical world and a personal dream world? There's a couple of differences. One, it's persistent. When you wake up, you continue from where you left off. When you go to sleep and dream, it's different. So persistence is one. Stability is another. This world is fairly stable. Things are constantly changing, but they're changing in a slow, stable way. In the dream world, they're not that stable. Things are changing in a rapid way and are very much dependent on you, your emotions, what you've been thinking about, and what you've been feeling. And 3, there are other minds in the waking world. Other subjective sentient beings that you can interact with. In the dream world, it's just you. There are dream characters you can interact with, but they are not sentient, persistent minds. So why is there this difference? Because if this is the objections that you'll get, well, dreams are different. Yes, dreams are different. But the thing is, and see, I believe it was the philosopher Schopenhauer said there's short dreams, the dream that you go to, go and sleep at night and have, and then there's the long dream of reality. So dreams versus the waking reality aren't different in substance. They're just different in certain attributes. And the reason why is because when you sleep and have a personal dream, it's just your mind that generates that dream world. And because it's just your mind that generates that dream world, that's why it is not persistent, that's why it's not stable, and that's why you're the only mind in it. It's not persistent because it's completely dependent on your mental setup. So what I mean by not persistent, it's your mental configuration is always there. What I mean by not persistent is that you don't necessarily leave off, pick up where you left off last. Maybe sometimes you do. Maybe some people it happens, but that's definitely not always the case. That's because your dream world is dependent on your mind, what you're thinking about, and it's not stable because it's completely dependent on your emotions, what you've been thinking about, and then you're the only one in it. Now, the waking reality is just like a dream, except the waking reality is composed of all the minds in existence. It's a shared dream. It's a dream that we're all having together. This is why it is persistent, because we're all contributing to it. This is why it's stable, because it's not dependent on just one mind. It's all of us together. So it's not dependent on just how you're feeling or what you're thinking about. It's depending on what all of us are thinking, what all of us are thinking about. And there's a lot of conflicting ideas. That's why we have a conflicting world. Everything starts in the mind. We have an idea of something we want to create. We go out and create it. We have an idea. We share it with others. Everything begins in the mind. And then there are other minds in this waking world because, by definition, what the waking world is and so-called physical reality is a shared dream. So a great way to help people understand that reality isn't physical is to talk about how real dreams seem. And how do they know that physical reality couldn't be like that? The only difference is in persistence, stability, and a multiplicity of minds. But if it's a shared dream, a dream that we're all having together, those things are easily explainable because it's not dependent on just one mind, it's dependent on multiple minds. So of course it would be persistent, of course it would be stable, and of course there would be more than one mind. So the next one is what we see reality, what's actually there. Another example I use is how to explore how vision works. So we assume that when we look at a chair in our house, that our vision captures it exactly. That our perception is like a camera taking a snapshot of what's there. Most people, in the common sense view of reality, they think what they're seeing and experiencing is reality is how it is. They see a chair, they think that that's actually what a chair is, that's how a chair looks, and that's what a chair truly is. Real quick, by the way, I want to mention and go back to the dream. I want to talk about real quick how the philosopher Bishop Berkeley said that reality was essentially a shared dream, that we all exist in a mental world, that it's not physical. And the story always goes that someone said, I refute Berkeley thus, and they kicked a rock. Essentially going, of course reality is physical. Look, I can kick a rock. But that doesn't refute anything. But you're going to find people like the author of this article said, his students went, well, of course it's physical, and they banged their hand on the desk. Well, in a personal dream, you can kick rocks and bang your hand on the desk, all day long. Same thing you can do, but it's not physical. So that does not refute simply banging your hand on things. It's a very primitive sort of cave person-like idea. Oh, things solid. It's important to point out how just because you can interact with things in a way that, just because your hand isn't going through things like a ghost, doesn't mean that reality is physical. And dreams are a great example of that. So talking about vision, most people think that what is out there is actually out there. If they see a tree, they think, well, that's what a tree is really like. they think that perception is basically like giving them complete and consistent data about what existence is. Now, this is more or less the empirical view of reality, that sense data leads to truth and knowledge. And this is more or less the position taken by empirical materialist science. So the author continues, that is not how vision works. What happens is that light waves bounce off an object and go into our eyes, where they travel down the optic nerve to our brain, which then creates a picture of what we assume is out there. But does the image my brain create match the chair that is out there? We don't know, because we can never get outside of our own heads, our own perceptions, to check. We never get to see reality as it really is, only as we perceive it through our filters. That's another important thing to get people to understand if you're talking to them about this. Say what you are seeing out there and what you are experiencing out there. Don't assume that what you are seeing and experiencing is what reality actually is. In fact, we know that it's not giving you an accurate representation, because humans only see a tiny portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, the visible light portion. So that's another thing, that if you're explaining this to people, get them to think about that. Get them to understand, hey, what you're seeing, what you're experiencing isn't necessarily how things actually are. Have you ever thought about that before? So you're hitting them, having them start to think about all these ideas. Have you thought about how dreams are such and such? Have you ever thought about how reality isn't necessarily how it is that you experience it through your senses? Now here's another one. A third way, the red sunglasses example. So the author continues, it's like being born with red sunglasses covering your eyes. When we look at the world, if you were born with red, so pretend you were born with red goggles, right? You have permanent red goggles stuck to your eyes. You were born like that. You've never taken them off. They've always been on. You've only experienced reality through these red goggles. So when you look at the world, it would always have a reddish tint. Everything would look like a red hue. Now, we wouldn't question it, because everyone else is also born with these red sunglasses attached to their eyes, so they see the same thing. So imagine everyone else had these red goggles on. So everyone in the world was born with these red goggles. They've never taken these red goggles off, and they're looking at reality. And so to them, everything seems like it's tinted red. Well, everyone would think that the world was tinted red. So we all assume that the reddish tint is part of the world, never thinking it is we who are imposing it on the world. Now, this is a philosophy, this is an idea that goes back to Kant. This is a Kantian idea, that reality in itself isn't how reality actually is, but that we as minds actually impose our own conceptions onto reality. It makes mind at the center of existence. So we can never step outside of ourselves to see what the world is really like. We just assume that our vision gives us a true picture of reality. So if you were born with these goggles on, everything would seem like it was tinted red, and everyone would think it was as well if they were born with these red goggles. But think about this. You and everyone would believe that red hue was how reality really was. That things really were tinted red. Because none of you had the ability to ever take them off and see how the world really is. So you would think that attribute of redness was part of the world out there, but in reality it's not. You're imposing that upon the world. You just experience the world that way. It's not part of the world. So likewise, you are trapped in what your senses are feeding you. Your own senses, your eyes, your ears, your hands, your nose, your tongue, all these sensory experiences that you have are like the goggles that you were born with. You can't experience the world, empirically speaking, outside of it. You can't experience it outside of your senses. And so the world could be completely different than how you experience it. Just like if someone were to be able to take off those red goggles and be like, oh, wow, I thought the world was tinted red this whole time. It actually isn't. But we're talking about something even more, much more extreme, where it's like you take it off and you go, oh, wow, I thought reality was physical, but it turns out that reality is all mental frequencies. This is another good way to get people to understand, really break them of, try to get them to think outside of the box. The man in the room is another good one. So it's also like a person who has spent their entire life in a room with no windows. So imagine that you spent your whole life in a room with no windows and no view of the outside world. He has a television that he has been told is connected to a camera that allows him to view the activities in his front yard. So you're born in a room. You've never seen the outside world. You have no windows. You have no way to see the outside world except for a TV that says that there's a camera which allows you to see what's in the front yard. So this person sees children running, traffic, people walking by, flowers blooming, and trees shedding their leaves, and so on. The question is, how does he know that his television truly reflects his front yard? He can never get outside of his room to verify its authenticity. How does he know that he's even sitting in a room on a block on this planet? You could imagine that the entire world out there was after a nuclear war and everything is desolate, nothing exists. But on the TV could be a recording and this person would have no idea. He might even not imagine he's not even on the planet. He could be in an alien facility. He could just be watching a videotape that somebody pre-recorded over a long period of time that has nothing to do with what's going on outside his room. He could even be on a spaceship, hurtling through space billions of miles from Earth, watching these videos that create the illusion he is in a suburban house on Earth. How does he know his television is accurately reflecting the reality outside his room? He does not. And likewise, we can't know if our vision accurately reflects reality because we can never get outside of our own heads to verify it. You are permanently viewing reality through your sensory data that is being received and transmitted to you. And you can't experience the world outside. You can't get outside of your sentient mind to check what the world actually is, because you are a sentient being. You can't get out, you can't remove yourself from your own sentient experience. So the Hindus call this world Maya, which means illusion. This doesn't mean nothing is there, but rather that what we see isn't the full picture. That's important to understand. It doesn't mean that there's literally nothing out there. That would be crazy. It just means that we're not seeing the full picture. And what the full picture is that what is out there is actually mind that we are experiencing in a filtered and conditioned way. What is out there is mental information, and our senses take that information, filter it, and condition it to give us the particular experience that we are having right now. That's how we're able to have experiences, because we take information and it's filtered in a certain way. It's like a video game versus the computer game code. So this doesn't mean nothing is there, but rather that what we see isn't the full picture. We can only see as much of reality as our rods, cones, and brains allow us to see. We know that visible light, the wavelengths that we can actually see, represent only a tiny portion, listen to this, 0.0035% to be exact, of the electromagnetic spectrum. So our vision is very limited. Think about that, 0.0035%. If you were able to see just 0.01%, reality would be dramatically different for you. And that's at 0.01%. Imagine 0.1%. Imagine 1%. Imagine 10%. What we are experiencing is, it's almost hard to get someone to understand exactly how small of a portion of reality that we are actually experiencing right now. And then he goes on to another example, dragonflies and humans. So think of a dragonfly with 12 photoreceptors in its eyes flying over a lake. Does this dragonfly see the same lake that humans do with only 4 photoreceptors? I don't think so. His view of the lake would be much richer than ours. He sees aspects of the lake that are far beyond our perception. A dragonfly will have a completely different experience of the world. But, you know, someone might be thinking, okay, well, that's well and good. The dragonfly might experience it in a certain way. You might experience it a different way. Think about a bee and a bat. Think about a bat that just, you know, doesn't even, just a totally different way. But again, people might think, well, but there's still a physical world out there. You're just experiencing it different. But the point is to really hit home that reality is so dramatically different than what you think is out there. It's not just, oh, well, there's a physical reality and you experience it differently than a dragonfly and a bat and the bee and a dog. It's that it's so different that what is out there isn't what one would call physical reality at all. It's pure frequency, energy, information that your senses are allowing you to experience as the physical phenomenological experience that you have. Because you'll probably hear that a lot. If you tell this to someone, they'll probably go, well, okay, fine. You know, I admit that what I see is out there is different than a dog or a bee or a bat. Could be totally different, but there's still a physical world out there. No, it's to really think about, you know, I see this pen a certain way. A dragonfly will see this pen a certain way. A dog will see this pen a certain way. A bat will experience this pen in a certain way. A bee will experience this pen in a certain way. And it will all be dramatically different. So what is this? What remains when all senses are removed from the picture? When there are no eyes? Like, how do I put this? So if you're thinking about the different animals, which one is the real one? Which one is correct? Because the human, the bee, the bat, the dragonfly, they're all having a different experience of this pen. So which one is the right one? You kind of, because humans tend to think, oh, mine is, just automatically, even if they don't consciously think it. They think, well, what I'm seeing is real, and everything else is just a variation on that reality. That's not true. So if you have these different experiences of what existence is, what this pen is, what is the pen with all senses removed? What would be here without the senses to interpret this? And what would be there is simply information. What is there is information in terms of frequency that we can experience as red, a certain length, you know, cylindrical, a certain, you know, tactile experience. So we can apply that to any creature on the planet. What reality does your dog or cat or bird or fish or rabbit see or experience? While each sees reality in its own way, it is still just a different slice of the same ultimate reality of which everything is a part. So there's information here. That's what it is. I interpret this information a certain way. The dog interprets the information a certain way. The dragonfly interprets a certain information a certain way. And, you know, the cat a certain way, the bat a certain way. But they're all just interpretations. Every single one is an interpretation of a subjective experience of this, which is just information in terms of frequency that we are experiencing through our senses that allow us to have an experience of that information. So, Bruce continues here, reality is far more than humans can perceive. So the upshot of all this is that reality is far grander and magnificent than we can ever imagine. Therefore, it is extremely arrogant for humans to think that they view reality as it really is. Again, he said, according to him, 0.0035% is what humans experience with regard to the electromagnetic spectrum. And it's really arrogant for humans to think that they view reality as it truly is. Understanding this humbles us and shows us that we are part of a much grander reality than we had previously thought possible. So when you're trying to explain these things to people, If you just hit them with a ton of information at once, they're going to be confused. It's going to sound crazy. The first step is to just get them, just to kickstart their thinking, for them to be able to question what they have taken to be common sense or just true because everyone else believes it. That there is a physical reality out there that is the way that we experience it. And once that's just the first part, getting them to understand that that's not true. And the reason why that's important is because if you try to, show them what reality is, well, they already think reality is a certain way. But if you show them that reality can't be the way that they thought of, well, then that starts the process of, oh, well, you're right. It couldn't be that way. Because obviously I don't see everything as it is. So what is it? And that question is what gets people to start thinking. So understanding this humbles us and shows us we're part of a much grander reality than we previously thought possible. It enables us to enter a state of wonder as we drop the notion that our view of reality is the only one that counts. That's important as well. I remember when I was growing up when I was younger, very young. I don't know how young, 10, 11, I don't know. Or, well, no, wait, 14, 15, I don't know. I don't know how old I was, but I remember thinking, not being terribly too interested in science at the time, in a detailed way, because science kind of gives this idea that they have everything figured out, but there's just little things to fill in here or there. Like, oh yes, we completely know that reality is physical. We know exactly how reality works. There's just a couple things here or there that we don't really get. Sort of like, we don't really understand how quantum gravity is able to comply with, general relativity. We don't really understand how consciousness is possible, but we're going to figure it out. Like, it's only a matter of time. We're going to figure it out. So it kind of kills the wonder because, I know that I'm just a piece of material that randomly was here and is going to be, going to decay and die. So what's the point? But it's important to understand that the wonder, there's so many things that we have to unlock, so many things that we don't understand. So in Hyperianism, we understand that this reality is not a physical reality, and we understand that reality behaves in a rational way. We have a lot of good understandings of, big picture sort of things, but there's so much to figure out. There's so much to explore. There's so much growth. There's so many interesting things to understand. Even the things that we think we understand right now are just a tiny portion of what we can know and experience. So we need to see that reality is much more dynamic than the physical reality would allow. Take time to stop and smell the flowers and listen to the birds. Let us use this newfound appreciation of reality to inspire us to save our beautiful life on this planet. Let's not use our human arrogance and short-sightedness. Let's not let it lead to our destruction. It's a good point. So it says take time to stop and smell the flowers, listen to the birds. One should try this with the understanding that everything you see is not how it actually is. It's completely different. Go outside and take a look at everything. Look at all the different things that you see, touch, hear, smell, and realize it's only 0.035% of the electromagnetic spectrum and so many other aspects that we didn't even discuss. But look around and realize that it's all completely different. And just sitting with that for a while, really letting that sink in and pondering that, getting the wheels turning. It's a really good exercise. And these are some of the simple ways to get people or to start thinking about this. Now, of course, when you really want to understand reality, you have to start using logic and reason. You have to start really understanding that existence is a certain way. And by being able to utilize both intuition and reason in a complementary way, guided by reason, so that one can come to a true understanding of existence. Hyperianism is all about this, because when you understand what existence is, what you are, where you are, and why you are here, you'll understand that we're all part of one system, that we're all in this together, and that we are all myriad reflections of each other and different aspects of one reality. The reason why this is so important to understand is because when humanity realizes this and enters into this phase of consciousness, all the difficulties that we have today, all the major difficulties that we have today, will begin to diminish. Sexism, hatred, homophobia, violence, all these things will begin to diminish, because when you understand what existence is, where we are, what we are, why we're here, and that we're all part of a united system in this together, you understand that hurting someone else is like hurting yourself. You understand that someone else's difference isn't something to be scared of, it's something to learn from and celebrate. All the beautiful diversity that we have together and are expressing isn't something to hate and fear, but rather it's a opportunity to get to know each other better. And when you realize that we're all in this together, getting to know each other better is getting to know yourself better, because we're all different aspects of this, all in this together. Hatred of the other is not the way to unity. Celebration of the other, celebration of individuality and uniqueness in a strong community is the way to a world in which we can learn, grow, explore this beautiful experience that we're having together. It's not beautiful right now. There's a lot of hate in this world, but it doesn't have to be this way. It can be something so much better, and we can make it happen. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't. We can make it happen. And this is the first way. This is how it starts. Just getting someone to realize that what they see is not what's out there. And if you can really get them, just start that. Just kickstart that idea. Then it'll start the process of, oh, wow, you're right. That is not what's really out there. Well, what is it then? So I hope this video helped to have simple ways for you to be able to explain reality to people. And if you didn't understand it yourself, hopefully this got the wheels turning. And remember, this was a very, very simplified, purposefully simplified explanations, because that's the whole point of this video. If you want detailed explanations of why reality isn't physical and all the different aspects of Hyperianism, check out my videos on my channel. There's tons of playlists. There's tons of videos. It's all there. And I want to give a big shout out to everyone that supports on Patreon. And if you've ever felt like you've learned something or gotten something from my videos, consider supporting on Patreon. Helps out a lot. It's the best way to support my work. You get access to our weekly secret live streams, our hidden Discord server, the Citadel, a lot more. And shout out to our top supporters, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, Jordy, Top of the World, Zach, and Ethan. You're all fantastic. I appreciate it very much. Everyone else as well. The link will pop up right over here. Thank you very much, my friends.